Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the April edition of Molten Music Monthly. April is always an odd month because it's the lead up to Superbooth, so you get a few things that leak and squeeze out but don't always give you the entire picture. So I've kind of ignored anything which is only a hazy shimmering of something potential from this place or that place, and I'm going to focus on what we know this month, I think. And I don't have time to fluff around, so let's get straight to it. I'm going to kick things off with something you absolutely have never seen before, and that is a modular hurdy-gurdy. Oh yes, the hurdy-gurdy is that fantastic, the legendary, the most ultimate, I think, of all early music instruments, of folk music instruments, that thing that yawns its way back into the buzzing strings of yesteryear. It's the most extraordinary thing. If you've got no idea what I'm talking about, it doesn't really matter. To be fair, you're unlikely to come across one, but I was fascinated by these many years ago because I was deeply, firmly embedded in folk music when I was studying in London back in the early 90s. I think it was, and I was planning on building my own hurdy-gurdy, but I was reliably informed by my woodworking music teacher that they just sound terrible. Unless you are a master craftsman. It's difficult to produce something that sounds good unless you really do know what you're doing. And so I built flutes and just things like that instead. By the by, there's this geezer, right, called Rory, I think, who, inspired by his mate Sam, who is a master craftsman with the hurdy-gurdy, to build a modular synth into one of these machines, turning into some kind of strange hybrid monster of buzzing, rasping strings and yet synthesized and sampled sounds. If you're someone who's familiar with folk music at all or has been into this kind of stuff, it will be quite a remarkable thing to see. It's not a beautiful device. Hurdy-gurdies were often quite beautiful, although strangely ungainly and unwieldy, and never looked quite very comfortable in the arms of the player, and this certainly lives up to that. It's quite a blocky box of stuff, but what you've got, being a little bit interpretive in the video because I don't give all of the details away, there's a crank handle. Now, in a traditional hurdy-gurdy, this is essentially something that turns a wheel that is bowing strings. It's very, very clever technologically, really. It's the bowing of a string, and so it creates this drone in a bit like bagpipes, that sort of way, and then you have this keyboard or these buttons on the top which depress against the string in order to stop it at different pitches, and so you get this drone and then this melody on top. And your man here has taken that idea and he's built into it both samples and modular synthesis, which is just brilliant. So you can switch between different sounds and it generates different sounds depending on which ones you switch, and then you patch them together and you can manipulate it in real time because it's there as part of the instrument while you're playing it, while you're droning it, and stuff. It's just a work of art. It's totally brilliant and I love it to death. I think it's a brilliant, wonderful idea, this mishmash, this hybrid, this protrusion of early music into modern music and yet sort of vintage music all in its own way. Obviously we talk about vintageness in being like the 1970s, whereas this is talking about probably the 1770s, I should think, or before. Who knows? Anyway, I thought it was a fantastic idea. I thought you should see it and enjoy it for what it is, because it's a joyous celebration of extraordinary things, an extraordinary way of using bits of Behringer synthesizers and modular and stuff and sticking it all together into a fantastic machine. Talking of fantastic machines, Bastl Instruments have come up with another little weirdy box thing. I've got one of the weirdy boxes over here. There we go. It's this is the Kastle Wizard, FX Wizard. Now they've done this again, but this time they've turned it into some kind of wave sample player. I have no idea how it works. There's no videos of it yet, which is a little bit sad, at least at the time of recording. So all we've got is this box, the same box, but somehow it's playing samples. Somehow you're getting samples into here and then you're manipulating them. I think it's got a bit of a filter built in, some effects maybe, some reversing, an envelope which goes backwards, and some jittery pokering around at different samples as you go. It's probably a lot of fun, but it's from Bastl, because undoubtedly will be, but in this sort of form factor it tends to be a little bit fiddly, but fun nonetheless. So that's one to look out for. Maybe perhaps Superbooth will reveal more, and I don't really know why I'm talking about it, because this is precisely the sort of thing I didn't want to talk about because I don't have enough information about it. But there it is. Make Noise are on a bit of a roll. I think they've now released, must be their second module in almost as many months. That never happens from Make Noise. This is the Jumbler. This is very on trend. The trend being that you take inputs and outputs and you mess them about with either scanning one into multiple outputs or multiple outputs into one. This idea that we're morphing between different things seems to be really what it's about. In fact, I have one here, the Jolin Rosa, which I've just built the other day in fact, and haven't quite gotten around to finishing the video on, but it's a similar thing, lots of inputs, lots of outputs, and a way of changing and swapping and modulating between them. That's what we have in this new Make Noise module called the Jumbler. Very apt actually in this occasion. The idea is you have 6 inputs, 6 outputs, and you have this knob that then rotates the inputs through the outputs. So you could have each output going to a different effect, and then you have audio channels going to different effects depending on where you put it. You could have modulators coming in, and your output is attached to 6 different synthesizer voices or filters or something, and so different forms of modulation are being modulated through different inputs into other things for modulation. It can also do one thing into lots of outputs, or I guess you take one thing and then you're scanning that between the outputs. Something like that. There's also some elements of morphing and changing, so it's not just fierce switching between things, but it's actually a VCA based transition between all of these different channels, which is quite interesting. So as usual, Make Noise do it with aplomb. They do it in such an elegant way as to make a module into kind of a very simple feature set into a bit of a work of art. But that's what they do. This is also part of their new super duper universal system, which I haven't found out what that's about yet. Maybe I will. I'm assuming it's another case full of stuff that uses some kind of middle section like their other CV busing thing did. Not convinced I'm going to be very coherent today, but I'm going to give it a go, so I've got to squeeze this in time that I have right now before I have to go and pick my daughter up from guides. God, there's always something going on. There's just never... Anyway, the Make Noise Jumbler. Make of it what you will. Gforce software have authentically recreated the Oberheim TVS Pro. Now, Gforce have done a whole bunch of Oberheim stuff and officially endorsed by Oberheim because of the quality of their software emulations and engineering. And quite rightly so, because this thing sounds fantastic. I've done a complete and utter full deep dive review of this, so do go and check that out. So I'm not going to waste an enormous amount of time here telling you about it, other than to say you've got 2 SEMs, 2 synthesizer expansion modules, both of which work completely independently. And then you've got a keyboard and you've got a sequencer, and those 2 things are injected into it in different ways. So you end up having this experience where as you're playing, one thing is triggering a sequence, the other thing is triggering drones or leads or basses, and it feels like a very different way to play because both voices are completely and fiercely independent, although you can chain them together. And so you have these 2 voices sounding very different, and there's this interplay between them and this layering and leveraging, and it's just a very interesting and unique playing experience. And it sounds like something dead out of the 70s. It sounds old-fashioned immediately, and deliberately so, and gloriously so. So go and check out my video on it. There's a lot to think about, a lot to hear, and it's just filled with an enormous amount of nostalgic joy in those waveforms. There's nothing like weird or hybrid or crazy. There's no polyphony other than those 2 voices, and yet it conjures up such great feelings and emotions when you play it. Definitely worth your time. Talking of the two voice, Behringer have released or announced or have got on a boat, something like that, with their 2XM, which originally when we first heard about this, we tended to call it the two voice. Now that I've spent a lot of time in the TVS Pro, I absolutely know that the Behringer X2M, 2MX, 2XM, whatever it is called, is not a two voice. It is two SEMs. It is two SEMs, absolutely. So it's based on the Oberheim original Synthesizer Expander module, and it has two of them put together, which you can address completely independently, or you can do it in unison or split. I think split together, unison, I don't know, there's a couple of different ways you can run it via MIDI, of course. As far as CV is concerned, you run the two completely independently, and that's great. It sounds good. It's relatively authentic, sounds very good based on the same original designs, and you have real life SEMs to play with. But it's not a two voice. It doesn't have the sequencer, doesn't have the keyboard, doesn't have the third oscillator, doesn't have all these other little bits and pieces that make the TVS and the TVS Pro specifically a very different and unique playing experience. Because the SEM, we know the SEM very well. Lots of synthesizers are based upon it. You have that voice knocking around, and it's great for Behringer to focus upon that and to give you that to play with absolutely intentionally. That's great, taking nothing away. It's just we shouldn't ever call it the two voice, because it is not doing that. The two voice is a unique combination of routing and modulation and sequencing that gives the two voice of TVS an absolute unique place in synthesizer history. And this is not that, but it's awesome in of itself. Also, Behringer have revamped, well, I say that, they haven't really. They've repainted the Deepmind. Now, the Deepmind is Behringer's, or was Behringer's, first big foray into the synthesizer market a decade ago, and to celebrate those 10 years they're re-releasing it, because it felt like it faded away. It felt like it hasn't been in stock in places for a long time, and so Behringer have restarted the fires and cooked it all up again, and sort of re-releasing it as the X version. X for 10, of course. That's great. The only thing that's different, as far as anyone can work out, is that it has a more deliberately Roland Juno-esque paint job. So rather than being black on grey, it's now got those quite soothing blues and reds of the Roland synthesizer that it's essentially modelled upon, loosely to some degree. And that's good. It's a good synth. It's very, very well priced. If you need an analog polysynth, and you're not fussed with brand names or those kinds of things, then this is absolutely for you, because it's a great synthesizer. A lot of good work went into it, a lot of good people worked upon it, and it sounds pretty great for what it is. Stay with the SEM just for one more moment. There's someone who's come up with a SEM themselves, a homage, if you like, to the original Oberheim SEM. This is by Adamsynths, and it's called the Solo. It's just a SEM, is what it is, hand built into a nice little case, ready to go. There's two oscillators. You also get an external input, the filter, that fabulous SEM filter that we like so much, simple modulation, and it's ready to go. They have enhanced it a tiny bit. They've made the envelopes a little bit punchier. They've added a sub oscillator, which is nice, and apparently there's a little bit more modulation than there was in the original, but otherwise it's there if you want an authentic through-hole, hand-built, hand-crafted. Our man from Rides in the Storm has finally got the CSM off the ground. The SED-CSM. This is, if you like, his flagship synthesizer voice. Everything he's done up to now is poured into this fella, and it's not actually that dissimilar from the SEM. seems to be the flavour of the month. You've got a couple of oscillators in there. You've got 3 subs apparently, a couple of LFOs as well. So lots of spinning waveforms going on. 24 dB filter. It's got wavefolding, remodulation, noise, and it has a fantastic mixer section that I really like. These sliders on the mixer very much like the SH101 or something like that. Something which really represents your mix of waveforms. I always find that to be enormously helpful on a synthesizer. The layout of it is really good. I love the fact that the patch points are top and bottom, giving you lots of space in the middle to do your stuff. It's semi-modular, so it is already patched, ready to work, so you can just get straight on there with these 2 oscillators feeding each other, wave folding, bending, subbing, noising, filtering. Yeah, that's all pretty good. It has loopable envelopes, so they can also be LFOs, or they can just be moving stuff around as you'd expect them to. It looks obvious and intuitive, which is really what we want. And if I know Rise in the Storm at all, it's that it's going to sound pretty epic. Talking of epic, these links are brilliant this month. Is anyone noticing? Talking of epic, Cherry Audio, they've put out a Wasp. They're calling it the Yellow Jacket. Yeah, nice. Which is a take on that most unreliable British synthesizer, the Wasp. They say there's not many of these around because most of them just fell apart. Or were purposely thrown away because people were fed up with the Flyers. But in these later days, we've all got a soft spot, I think, for the Wasp. It's something to do with the colour, and we imagine it to be a much nicer synthesizer than it probably actually was. It was a kind of a fizzy, waspish sort of thing, I suppose. Am I quoting from the Giant Jam Sandwich? Anyway, and what? So yeah, Cherry Audio have emulated and turned it into a bit of software. They've banged it out to 16 notes of polyphony, which is just nonsense. They've emulated the tiny speaker that was inside, which essentially lived up to its name. Don't know really why they've done that. Maybe it's just for funds. Who knows? They've bolted in an arpeggiator and some probability just to make it a bit more fun to use. But otherwise it's there with its couple of oscillators making fizzy, farty, waspy noises. The great thing about Cherry Audio synths is that they don't really cost very much, and so it can be a throwaway purchase on something which they've worked really hard upon and is going to give you a lot of fun to play with. While I was making last month's Molten Monthly, I was playing with the Create Audio boxes, which I wasn't allowed to talk about, which pained me deeply, but hey, now that I can. Now I've done a full massive review on the assembler, which is here, which is awesome. Best product of the year for me so far, I think, because it is actually useful. Terribly useful. I'm going to be using it all the time. It's going to be a permanent thing sitting around here patched together in order to help me mix things. I keep trying to mix in the case, and I do a little bit, but it just gets too difficult, too hard, and I need the space for more sounds. So taking the mixing out of the case into a little desktop unit of the assembler is brilliant. I mean, you've got 10 channels, you've got mono channels, stereo channels, you've got aux sends all over the place. You've not got to fuss around with a proper desktop mixer that's got like channel strips and EQ, none of that stuff going on. It's simple, straightforward, bit of panning, bit of level, muting, headphones and line out, bish bash bosh, mini jack inputs, perfect for Mzourack and other little desktop synths. It's a winner. It's an absolute winner. It's really good. Not because it's the most awesomely made, rugged, British sounding mixer. No, just because it's absolutely fundamentally useful. And that's what you want. That's what you want. They've also come up with the Boom Chick, which is this. It's an analog drum machine. Interesting because it has kick and snare, has hi-hats, but then in the middle it has these 2 FM sounds, 2 FM drums. Now, analog FM, so not digital waveforms or anything like that. You've got a couple of oscillators bashing into each other to create weird sounds. Which reminds me of something else. Oh yes, the FM Drum from America Synths, which I'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But it's that sort of idea right built in here. I haven't really got to grips with it yet. I'm going to do a video review of it as soon as I can find the flipping time to do that. But it looks simple enough, looks comprehensive enough, and sounds pretty interesting. So I'm looking forward to wrapping myself around that. In other news, in other directions, Intellijel have come out with something granular. I just don't get on with granular. It doesn't seem to be for me. Whatever it is, wherever it goes, it just ends up being kind of a load of old nonsense. And the Multigrain, is that what it's called? The Multigrain, nice name from Intellijel. It's probably going to be the same. But if anyone can make granular interesting, then baby Intellijel is that. Now I know you're sitting out there going, what do you mean? Granular is my life. My life is granular now. Well, that's fine. That's good for you. It's just not my bag, man. Anyway, what does the Multigrain do? Well, it lets you have 8 of the fellas. 8 samples at once, all having their grains pulled out of them backwards through their teeth. being sploshed and thrown around the place as if, you know, sort of naked and alone out there. It's horrible, really. I mean, it's a terrible business. It really is. But anyway, as I understand it, you have a couple of scenes or places where you fold these things into and can then transition or morph from one scene to another, which sounds quite interesting. Ultimately, in the demo, it's sort of like I want to be a Aphex Twin kind of thing. I just want to throw samples around in different glitchy kind of granular sort of ways, and we all go yay, and then wonder how we can't fit it musically into anything else at all in our rack ever. I'm sure it's great. Someone's going to have to sit me down at Super Booth and say, look, this is how granular works. This is why it's brilliant. Whereas ever since I first had a Clouds, I've been scratching my head going, why do people like this? Why? Just tell me why. In more positive news, we have the Monumatic from Knobula. This is fabulous. I've used this already, used this in a gig recently, but I wasn't allowed to tell you about it. So I had to, when I did my video about the patch I used, I had to take this out and put the Polycinematic back in and try to work out how to use that, which is much harder. The Monumatic is similar in that it's a polyphonic synthesizer in a module, but I found it actually far more accessible, far easier to use than a Polycinematic, which is quite interesting because they're not that different, but there's just been enough tweaking to this to make you think, oh yeah, no, I can't. Well, that makes a lot more sense this time around. So this is billed differently as well, because I think there was a lot of misunderstanding with the Polycinematic. You kind of felt like you were being swindled slightly because it was a polyphonic synthesizer, but in your rack you couldn't access that polyphony very well, at least not on CV. You had to use MIDI. But there was some shenanigans you could do with chords, but that was not easy either, let me tell you. Whereas a Monumatic, they're putting it forward much more as it's a monophonic, awesome, unison type synthesizer for modular, or it's a polyphonic MIDI synth. And I think that distinction is really important because it means that you understand what it is going in. It means that you understand that if I could stick it in a purely analog modular situation, it's not going to give me a polyphonic experience necessarily. But if I've got MIDI going on, then it absolutely will. And I think that's good. That's great, because that really plays into the strengths on both sides of it, which is what you want. So what is it all about? What is it? This is packed full of virtual analog synthesizer engines. So you've got, there's no way I'm going to be able to read it from here, but from memory, you've got Super Saws, you've got Casio CZ, you've got Selena strings, you've got other lo-fi strings, you've got squares and sawtooths, and was there anything else? Oh, organs and pulse width modulation, that kind of thing. So a bunch of different sort of synth engines all within here that you can just dial up with this not entirely satisfyingly clicky knob there. But you've also got reverb built in, you've got a filter built in. In fact, isn't there 6 different filters? Did I read that wrong? No, I didn't. It has 6 different filter types in there too. So it's a lot more comprehensive. You've got a bit of an envelope stuff. There's a little bit of shift type menu shenanigans going on. But otherwise it's pretty intuitive. There is a chord mode, which is better than a Polycinematic, at least I'm finding, in that it has a bunch of chords built in already. So you can just sort of dial in the sort of chord that you want and then transpose that from CV. And that is interesting because you instantly get to something. Because with the Polycinematic, you're always trying to generate these chords via MIDI and plug that in and save that, and it was just difficult. Whereas this I'm finding much, much easier. Now I'm going to be doing a full review of this very soon, I hope, hopefully before Super Booth, so like next week, I suppose that means. That's my plan. I might not accomplish it, but I'm going to do my best. So look out for that. Arturia have released collection number 11. I'm not quite sure how to say that properly. The release of... They've got a collection of instruments, right? And this is the 11th time they've put this collection of instruments together. This time around, they've acquired a few things that have already been out, like the Mini Brute one, the Synthex one, I think it is. They've also updated the SEM, funnily enough, and a load of the augmented instruments as well. But there were a couple of brand new things. One of them was the JP8000, or Jupiter 8000, I think they're calling it for reasons unknown, which is a model on that classic virtual analog Roland synthesizer of the 90s, and that is undoubtedly fantastic. It's all full of super saws and big sounds going around, big dance sounds, lots of trance sounds, all that kind of malarkey. The other thing is something called pure lo-fi, which I really fell in love with, I have to say. I've done a video on this, a nice big deep long hour video all about it, and it's essentially a synthesizer that tries to put in as much vintage vibe and feel and lo-fi crappiness as humanly possible. You've got virtual analog, you've got samples, your own samples or built-in samples that you can use as oscillators. You've got two of those. You've then got sampler engines you can run through to give it that bit of sort of 12-bit crackle. You've then got some lo-fi analog filters to run it through, and then a shed load of crappy effects to make it fall apart and deteriorate, including an entire sort of sound environment that you can load onto it to pull it further apart in all sorts of different and interesting ways. It's sort of tape emulation, cassette emulation, that kind of stuff. The result is just this wonderfully nostalgic, crazy, wonderfully lo-fi sound. It's brilliant. I had one comment on my video which was that it just seemed like a sample set of Pigments, which was a fair thing to say, but inaccurate, I would say, because it's not that. It's not just an epic sound library source of something that someone's curated. It is absolutely a synthesizer, because you start from waveforms, whether that's a sample, wavetable, or a virtual analog wave, and you're starting from that level of oscillation, and then you're combining stuff and building and layering and filtering. So it's very much a synthesizer workflow, not a sample library workflow, and I think that distinction is important. And I've found that you can get a huge range of sounds out of it with or without all the vintage gubbins on top. It's just a really nicely put together, visually splendid, great sounding software synthesizer, and a lot less baffling than Pigments. I mean, you know, in Pigments you've got everything, sure, and this does borrow from Pigments in terms of the filters and the oscillators and bits and pieces, but it is not that at all. It is much simpler, and you can get into it and you can start playing without being baffled by all these rows and rows of modulators and stuff and things flying about the place. It's really, really good. I thumbs up about the pure lo-fi. Go and check that one out. This is another one of those crazy little boxes. There seems to be a desire out there for crazy little boxes packed full of synthesis engines. For what? For people who want to ruin their eyesight just to work on a tiny little space, on a tiny little thing with tracks and tracks and tracks of stuff going on. It's, you know, people like it, apparently. This one caught my attention because it's from Vadik Minkin, who's a geezer who works for Soma Labs, producing all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff for them. So that is always a thing of note, I should think. This is called Kaleidoscope. It's got 4 channels. It's a groove box. It's all based on generative stuff, so you can sort of force it into producing stuff and producing patterns and rhythms for you, which can be affected by or not affected by an external sequencing going in. It's got an interesting interface, not entirely sure how that works. I mean, you've got knobs, I understand, but you've also got these tabby buttons. I'm not entirely sure what the interaction is like. The screen is very much like it was stolen from a Game Boy or something and seems to be quite cryptic. Will you ever know what any of that means? Who knows? But it's alive with animation and stuff going on, and it's fiddling about. You've got subtractive, additive, you've got physical modelling and FM in there, you've got some overdrive like crazy, and it's very much about building an entire universe over 4 tracks of music within a tiny box. Sebsongs Rhythmatic is a take on the Roland CR78. That's really about it. 6 sounds pretty awesome. It's got tons of patterns built in, so you can just dial in a pattern like the CR78 and off it goes. It does its thing. You can, of course, program your own. Of course you can. You can program all your own patterns if you like. That looks a little fiddly to me. You've got to hold shift and then tap a button. Oh, you know, hold shift. The shift is you've got to do it in step mode, essentially. So you end up having to do like yes, then space, yes, space, yes, no, yeah, things like that. Which is a bit long-winded, programming drums, but it's the way that it works. It's got a big knob in the middle, which is sort of the busy knob. The further you turn it, the busier it gets, or if you turn it the other way, the less busy it gets. And I think that's a really nice way to increase variations and stuff within a drum machine. And it is completely self-contained. It runs itself, it has its own sounds. You can access it from another drum machine if you want, but otherwise, what a great little compact device. The Diktaat. This is from the geezer who brought you Pebbles. Where's Pebbles? It's knocking around just over there somewhere. Pebbles was great. So this idea of having these two, it's like having an LFO going through these 2 points that you adjust, which then sends out triggers. Doesn't really matter. He has a new thing out. It's called the Diktaat. Oh, I don't bloody know. But this looks brilliant. I'm absolutely totally taken with it immediately as soon as I saw it. The reason being is because I have a hole in my life for such a device. Recently, or up until recently, I was using the Detroit Pink 87, which is a great little clacky keyboard key in a module which you create trigger patterns with. I use trigger patterns all the time, not just for drums, in fact rarely for drums. I tend to use it for firing envelopes and sequencing, you know, to create the gate patterns for a sequence that's happening elsewhere. And so I found that enormously useful, but then I had to sadly give it back, and I'm too much of a cheapskate to go and buy my own. So I've been using the Bastl Neo Trinity as a replacement, which is alright, but it's a little bit fiddly. So I think you can probably see where I'm going with this. So the Diktaat, oh, what's the matter with me? So this awesome thing, right, is a 4-channel kind of version of that. You've got 4 clacky mechanical switchy buttons on it, which form the 4 channels of stuff that you're doing. So it does lend itself very much towards drums and finger drumming. That's interesting because I'm flipping awesome at finger drumming. People don't realise that I'm, you know, in my past, I'm an award-winning finger. I'm not really, but I really liked finger drumming. It's something that I do quite well. So you have that built in, as well as obviously 64 steps of trigger sequencing that you can build up as you do it. It has live performance tools, it has muting, it has other bits and pieces built in. In fact, it looks a little bit overly complex, perhaps, for what I need it for, but I'm very excited to get my hands on one, and I do hope to do so after Superbooth. So your man behind the Diktaat was saying to me earlier that please don't tell people that they can have one straight away, because he's literally sold out of his first run and is frantically trying to make some more. So it could be 4 to 6 weeks before you get your hands on one, which gives me time to make the video which will tell you all about it and let you know whether that's the sort of thing that you would be into. But generally speaking, I'd probably just say yes, I think so. I mentioned this briefly earlier. Arturia have an FM drum up their sleeve. Now this is part of the DIY range, the MKI ES EDU, I think something like that. I built a whole synthesizer of their stuff. It's this range of DIY stuff sponsored by Arturia that and run by a guy called Moritz Klein and designed by him to be a complete modular system that you build yourself out of the simplest, most basic through-hole components in order to really understand and learn how electronics and modular synthesis works. It's a brilliant endeavor. I love it. And the FM drum is the next part of their drum series, which they're moving towards doing an entire DIY system that's just for percussion. We've seen the kick, the snare, the hi-hats. They've got a compressor, BBD delay. Oh yeah, I've got one of those to build. Definitely need to get into that. Stick that on my list. Flipping heck. Anyway, so there's this FM drum, and there will be a forthcoming trigger sequencer and mixer. So I mean, FM at this stage, you've just got 2 oscillators bashing into each other to create a range of different sounds, and that's the idea. That's what we get in the Boom Chick too. You know, it's all the rage. This is FM that I like. That I could understand. Yeah, definitely. The Adamsynths Warthog. This is a monster of a thing and a great concept that may or may not be something you find terribly, terribly exciting. We talked about this actually on the Sonic Talk a few weeks ago. You might want to go and look that up. But this essentially is a system, an entire modular system behind which there is a control system, a control layer which enables it to be completely and entirely recallable. So not just the parameters, not just every knob's position, although there's no actual motorized knobs involved, just to say, it is all, virtually done, I suppose, but it will also repatch it. There is not a little robot that's going to patch it for you. As I understand it, a little LED will light, stick a patch cable in, another one will light, stick a patch cable in. And that's how you can completely recall an entirely modular patch. It's a little bit of genius, it's a little bit of madness. It almost feels perhaps that you're trying so hard at this that you might as well just buy yourself a synthesizer and be done with it. Because part of the joy and excitement of modular is the exploration, is the fact that it's dangerous and transient and it's not going to be there forever. This lack of recall is part of what makes it alive somehow, in that you're driving these ideas and these sounds about the place and you know that they're no longer going to exist, and when you come back in the morning it will all be different. So this is against that. Now of course, if you're working in music, if you're writing music for a particular reason, or you're live performing and you need to replicate something accurately, then being able to recall an entire patch is... Sorry, I need to go and pick up my daughter. I'm frightened the life out of myself. Sorry, picking up. What am I doing? Yes, having a recallable patch is completely essential. So that would be amazing. We don't really know the whole system yet, or quite how it works, but maybe we'll be able to see it at Superbooth and get an idea behind what on earth it's doing. But it looks certainly very impressive. It's full of really clever technology, and we look forward to hearing more about it. Right, I better go, and I'll come back, finish this later. Ah yes, the Mango from Noisy Fruits. Is it Noisy Fruit? Noisy Fruit Labs. The Mango, this is... I don't think it's something we've ever seen before, and is quite remarkable. And I keep swirling it around in my head just trying to think, is this really, really useful, or just an over-engineering of a problem that doesn't really exist? I'm not sure yet. What is it? It's an Uber controller, a controller which controls both MIDI and CV, all built into one quite extraordinary desktop unit. It has 141 different points of control. Within that it has 32 analog controls for CV generation and control of CV devices, and the rest of it is MIDI. You've got faders, you've got knobs, you've got encoders. You've got it all built into the one quite remarkable device. It's remarkable because it's not just a uniform row upon row of knobs there. They seem to be set apart and categorized and grouped in interesting sort of ways, and they have differences and different things to do. You can control everything with a web app in order to set up your configuration, but ultimately you've got both MIDI and CV control in the one machine. I'm assuming that things like the faders, for instance, are both CV and MIDI. I mean, I'm assuming so. That it doubles up on those things. And is that interesting or not? And considering the amount of control on it, are you going to be looking at connecting it to multiple devices, in which case I think it only has USB and one TRS. So you might, in order for it to use a lot of desktop stuff, synthesizers and such like, you might want to have some kind of MIDI through box or something of that nature. I don't know. It throws up a few questions about how do you use all of that control effectively, and what actually it is that you are controlling, what does that allow you to do, and what would be the limitations or the hassles and the struggles in having to deal with this stuff anyway. Because MIDI, I've realized the longer that I use it, or the longer that I use CV, is that I realise how ham-fisted MIDI is all the time. I mean, of course, it's glorious. Just, take a breath before you comment about how your life has been transformed by MIDI. This is undoubtedly true, but it also is a pain in the arse many times. It's so difficult to use. It's so uncompromising in the way that data has to move about the place, that it's like, well, I've got a whole bunch of synths and I've got this one controller. It's not just as simple to stack up cables to go and use that all effectively. You have to configure it and route it and map it and all these other bits of nonsense. Whereas CV, you just plug it in here, plug it in there, oh, job done. Stack it up, molt it, job done. It's so easy in comparison. Anyway, by the by, so we have this hybrid controller, which is a really interesting concept. I wonder what it would in trying it out, what would it force you into doing? What would it what would it enable you to do? Would it enable you to bring your laptop into your modular very easily and yet keep hands-on control all the time? Because that's interesting. So, I don't know. Interesting concept, a fabulous thing to look at. They also have some littler ones, one called the Lemon, which is a little mini desktop one with just faders that's MIDI and CV. And there's one called the Kiwi, which is a Mzourack based version of the same. So it's definitely a concept that they're going for. And there is an increasing amount of MIDI within your Mzourack. MIDI control over effects, sometimes over the odd oscillator. The Monumatic that we talked about earlier, that is very much a MIDI. Although, would you use MIDI control? Because you've kind of got CV control over the main things. It's a question. It's a possibility. I wonder, is that useful or not? I don't know. So yeah, interesting. Makes you think about what it is you could do with such a thing. I was struck by the words of a YouTuber and music technological influencer, Ricky Tinez, and what he had to say about tariffs. Now, this whole tariff business is extraordinary. I mean, it's amazing to watch from the outside because it's both bonkers and baffling and somehow impressive, while at the same time it feels like you're stabbing yourself in the face all the time. But anyway, Ricky has some interesting things to say, which I thought were very, very measured and very wise. Not anything particularly deep, just kind of wanting to talk about it a little bit and express how in America you're going to start seeing a lot of price rises. Because I know, we all know that tariffs are designed to raise a lot of cash for the American government so they can spend it on champagne and yachts and stuff. We know that. That's fine. It's just that there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between who it actually is that pays those tariffs. Because there's this common illusion that it's the manufacturer, the other country, that pays the tariff as stuff gets imported into America, when actually that's not remotely true. It's the importer that has to pay the tariff, and ultimately that importer passes on that cost to the customer. And this is going to have a massive effect on synthesizers and the synthesizer industry, because nearly everything is made in China. Even your Moogs are made in China. There's a little bit of finishing goes off, or used to, in the Moog factory, but I don't even know if that happens anymore. But for the majority of people and cases, all of the circuit boards, all the pick and mix, pick and place production of these synthesizers happens in China or somewhere like that. And now those are all going to be subject to tariffs, and so inevitably the price of your synthesizers will go up. I mean, this has become a little bit sort of sharp focused to me because I'm in the middle of producing one of my best synths type videos, and I've been working on best synths under $1,000. And that is a movable feast at the moment. You don't know from one day to the next whether this synth still qualifies or not. So we're having to be a little bit loose about it because you just don't know. And it's a worry. It's a worry for everyone. I mean, this whole thing has just created such economic uncertainty and chaos. I mean, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the system needed shaking up. Who knows? Who knows what the end result will be? But what we know in the immediacy is really that prices for people buying synths in America is going to go up. And that's a shame. I mean, particularly from my perspective, I think it's a shame for the smaller guys. I mean, larger firms can stockpile stuff before the tariffs hit and can look after themselves a little bit and have a little bit of leeway. But the smaller people who build things in small batches, they get a lot of stuff done in China, a lot of stuff done in the Far East. And it's become easy and natural. You design a new module and you just fire off the files, and a week later you get a PCB back, or you get a finished module back for testing. It's easy and cost effective, and it's becoming less and less so. So I think a direct result may be we're going to see more American modular firms really struggle with this because their margins aren't great in the first place, and you're going to have to start charging more, and things are already expensive. So I don't know. I think I think there's trouble ahead for the synthesizer community in America. Outside of America, I mean, it's different. There's not a lot we want to buy from America, particularly, that's not already made elsewhere that we could just get direct, as opposed to having to go through America. So that's less of a problem for us, and we're not applying tariffs to anybody, particularly, assuming that you understand what a tariff is. But what it turns out to be is a tax on American consumers, which I don't think anyone really wants. But hey, never mind about that. I just wanted to highlight the fact that it is a thing and it's a reality, and I'm really sorry about that, and I wish it would all go away and that we could just trade in a global way as we have been for years. That would be fantastic. And I'm sure it'd be great if America brought more of its own manufacturing to its own shores, but that again will just inevitably put the price up because of the cost of labour and having to invest and do all of that. So our golden age of synthesizers, perhaps, is on shaky ground at the moment, but we'll see what happens. Sonic State is also, I believe, planning to do a bit of a special on it to get some people together to talk about the ramifications and the implications of what it is that's going on. And it's still, I guess, early days before we really work it out, because no one's sure about anything. But go and watch Ricky's video, because he's a wise, measured guy who I think would be helpful in this situation. And if nothing else, to educate ourselves about what's going on is helpful, and to be aware so that we can make the right decisions. I mean, who knows, this might just result in a very, very blossoming second-hand market. Who knows? Or a repair market, as we can no longer afford the new stuff. Maybe we look after our old stuff better or start reusing it. That could be no bad thing. And finally, I just wanted to have just a little word about affiliates. Affiliates is one of the ways that this channel is funded, or that I am funded. Molten Music Technology is funded, whatever way you want to look at it. And what an affiliate is, in case you don't really know, is simply that I get commission from any products that are sold when somebody clicks the links that I provide to said products. It's just raises a little bit of cash, not very much. We're talking about pennies on sales, but it depends. If you buy a whacking great big synthesizer, then I get a few more pennies on that. But normally speaking, it just raises a little bit, all of which is helpful. And I'm always looking for ways to fund this channel and to fund the Molten Music Monthly. I'm always open to ideas on that. I'm also open to sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor this video, just get in touch. It's really, really, really cheap to do so. If you'd like a little bit more advertising placed at the front of this video, that'd be great. But otherwise, if you're not the sort of person who wants to support me on Patreon or just throw money at me, but if you're in the market for buying goods and services under music technology, then if you use the links in the description of this video or on my website, then it will help. I will get a little kickback from that. It doesn't matter what you buy, strictly speaking, depending on which one it is. So it's not as if I'm trying to sell you a specific product. That's not the idea. Trying to sell you on the idea that music technology and synthesizers are awesome. Yes, I'm always trying to do that. And ultimately, if you buy something, that'll help me. Now, just to give you an idea of who I'm currently affiliated with, so that you know, I very recently picked up Gear4 Music, which is, I think, largely UK based, with perhaps European warehousing. I can never remember. UK based music shop, Gear4 Music, online only. And there's a link in the description. You click on that and go and shop at their great big shop, and you can buy all sorts of things from there, and I'll get a few pennies, which would be great. I've also recently picked up Donner. Now, Donner is actually a single manufacturer, but they produce an awful lot of different gear. So if you're in the market for anything from pianos, drums to guitars, they do their own brand. It's kind of a bit like Behringer, very much like Behringer, but my experience of them has been that they're open to stuff, they're interested, they're engaged, and they like to make products which are similar to, but their own take on, as opposed to exact copies of stuff. So that's all right. That sits okay with me at the moment so far. So if you're interested in any of the Donner stuff, then you can click that link, and that will help. I've been a long time affiliated with Perfect Circuit over in the States, and also Sweetwater. which is great. I do a bit of writing for Perfect Circuit too, so I feel a really good affiliation with them. So it would always direct you towards Perfect Circuit if you're over in the States in order to buy something. That would be great. They're a great bunch over there. They do good work. They look after people, and that would be helpful. In Europe, I'm also affiliated with Thomann. I mean, I don't care. I tie myself to anyone as long as they're not actually abusing me or other people. Then I'm open to it. Anything is helpful. So I'm affiliated with Thomann over in Europe, over in Germany. You can buy stuff from them through my link, and again, that's going to be very, very helpful. I also have an affiliate link with Rhodes Music. So if you're going to buy a whacking great big Rhodes piano or the software synthesizer version, then do use my link. That's very, very helpful. I also have one called Clockface Modular, which is out in Japan. No one has ever clicked that link or bought anything through it, but I live in hope that one day that might happen. So if any of you are out there in Japan, please do consider clicking on my Clockface Modular link. And the last one I've picked up recently is Vinyl Castle. This was slightly unexpected, but I was approached by them and it's like, sure, why not? Because I am thinking about doing a radio show, and so offering somewhere where you can buy vinyl records sounds like a possibility. So if you're interested in vinyl, wanted to pick up some stuff, check the link in the description, go and have a look and see what they offer, and I might get a few pennies from that. It's very exciting times. So that is my range of affiliates. None of that pushes me towards recommending any particular product or having a bias on any particular product at any case. At least in my view, that doesn't. There might be something subconsciously going on that I'm not even aware of, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't have the energy or the wit or the nerve to really try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. These are the affiliates that I have. I hope that's helpful, and please use them because it helps the channel. Otherwise, please do hop over onto Patreon, where you can pick up a couple of absolutely free to patrons software synthesizers that I've created, sort of, as well as Bastl bits of music and stuff, and you get to watch all of my videos without any adverts, without having to pay for YouTube Premium. So that's good, and I would really appreciate the support. Always appreciate the support, because it's tough out there. It's tough being a part-time YouTuber, trying to find work, trying to get this thing together, and I'd really like to be able to do more and more videos, and that just requires funding to support myself and my family in doing that. So any help is always appreciated, always. Right, that'll do. I think that'll do for now. We'll try to have a live stream this Sunday. I've got a busy day this Sunday, so I'll think about it, but hopefully, let's just assume that we will. This Sunday, whatever day of the week that is, we'll have a bit of a live stream and we'll talk about things. I've got a few bits and pieces I can show. We can talk about the idea for this radio show that I talked about last time. Might try to nail that down a little bit and then just make it bloody happen. Make it happen. So that'll be fun. That this Sunday, 8 o'clock. I should think, yes, let's do that. Otherwise, reviews I've got coming up on the Black and Blue Oscar Tria, which I've got sitting on there. The Monumatic, reviewing that. The Rosa from Jolin. The Boom Chick. The Redshift I've got sitting up here in prime position now. All of these things I've got to do. I've got some DIYs I want to get through. Got some great stuff coming up. Always good stuff. Too much stuff. Oh, I've got the Bitwig Connect turned up. This is an audio interface that also has Eurorack connectors on it. Looking forward to doing that. All sorts of videos I could do with that. So tons and tons of stuff I could be doing. I also do hope to go to Superbooth next week. I wasn't expecting to, but then for various reasons, there's a few things I need to sort of pick up, and rather than people trying to ship stuff to me, I figured it's almost would cost the same just to get on a bloody plane and go and get it myself. So I might well do that. I'm 90% sure that I am. Just for the day, just on the Saturday. So this is a week, this coming Saturday, I think, is Superbooth. Superbooth starts like Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday. So I'm just going to go for the day. I think I might be taking my daughter. Not sure yet. All these questions are up in the air. But if you are there at Superbooth and you see me, do feel free to say hello, because I am a little bit shy at these sorts of things. Never quite sure what to say or who to talk to or stuff. So don't think that I'm not bouncing over and talking to you because I don't care or don't love everyone. I do. I love everyone. I'm just not very good at it. So you're welcome to bump into me and say, hi, isn't it great that we're here? And what have you seen? You know, that sort of thing. That would be nice. That would be lovely. So that's the plan with that. Hopefully see some good stuff and we can move forward from there. I think that's all I've got for now. I hope that's helpful. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.